This is the Birth, Baby, and Life podcast with Kristen Burgess, and we're being quirky autistic mamas in episode number 211. Hey mama, it is Kristen, and I'm so excited to be back here this week for the fourth and final episode in our autistic mothering podcast series. This is a series that I really wanted to do. It's close to my heart, and I'm excited to be here. If you don't know me, if this is your first episode, my name is Kristen. I'm a pregnancy coach, and I work with mamas all over the world, helping them to enjoy a healthy pregnancy, grow a healthy baby, and to prepare for a beautiful birth experience. I also help moms who are trying to go from chaos to calm in their home so that they can have a happy, thriving home filled with happy and healthy kiddos. So again, we are on episode 4 of our series on autistic moms and pregnancy, birth. So we talked about pregnancy, we talked about birth. Last week we talked about breastfeeding and the newborn period. And this week we're going to kind of go bigger, and we're going to talk about mothering young children. Of course, we could talk about mothering children all over, the childhood span through the teenage years. But because I'm mostly talking to mamas of young children, that's where I am right now. And so when we look at being an autistic mom and figuring out how do we do things, how do we manage things, there's a lot going on with parenting young children. Everything from handling the young children themselves to taking care of yourself to managing the household and all of the kind of chores that go along with managing life with young people. So I'm going to touch on all of those things today. I hope this will be a good episode. As per usual, I have a lot of notes, so you may see me glance down at my notes, but I'm excited to bring all of this to you. I also want to note, especially in this episode, I think I mentioned it at the end of last week's episode, but I haven't touched on it a whole lot, but there is a great potential because we believe that autism and other neurodivergency runs in families. There's a great potential that if you show signs or have a diagnosis on the autism spectrum, that your kids are at least going to be quirky and highly likely that they will be neurodivergent themselves. So I'll touch a little bit on the parenting of neurodivergent children in this episode as well. So yeah, let's talk about creating a home environment where everyone thrives, which is really what we want. I think when I am working with moms and we're doing one-on-one coaching, particularly for looking at home life, and I ask, what do you want? Most moms talk about that they want a peaceful and happy home. So thinking about what kind of an environment you want for your home, maybe a good place to start this podcast episode, and then thinking particularly about some of the challenges that autistic moms may face and how you can work with those. Again, I want to encourage those of you who are not on the autism spectrum or who are not neurodivergent to listen to this episode as well, because so much of this is just information that can help you for any household management or for taking care of young children at any point. Just because the same things that tend to work for autistic moms are often things that work for other moms, and especially because a focus on routines and rhythms and that sort of thing is something that tends to be nourishing to all children, not just neurodivergent children. So let's begin. I've started the other episodes off with talking about sensory issues, so I thought that we would talk about sensory issues when we're talking about mothering. So looking at your home and creating a sensory-friendly home overall might be really good. So I talked about dim lighting and that sort of thing, and I didn't mention something. I'm going to end up talking about Waldorf pedagogy probably a couple of times across the course of this episode, just because I think that for the early years, Waldorf is really good. And you can do more research into pedagogy if you want to, but Waldorf really emphasized natural colors, natural lighting, rhythm and routines, warmth for young children. And so if you read, oh my goodness, it's been so many years since I read it. But I think it's by Rahima Baldwin Dancy, if I remember correctly, but she did a book on Waldorf in the early years, and I cannot remember the exact title of it. I will look for it in the show notes, but one of the things that I remember that she suggested was, like, even if you've got lamps in the room with your young baby or young child, that you might, have a silk, like a play silk, which is something that's often in Waldorf classrooms. So a colored silk would be over the lamp, so it just dimmed the light and muted it and colored it to just create a warmer, more diffused light in the room. So that sense of warmth and holding and peace and calm is something that is all throughout Waldorf pedagogy for young children. It shifts a little bit as you get to older children and they get more into intense academics. But especially in the early years, that's a lovely thing. And that book, I think the book is called You Are Your Child's First Teacher by Rahima Baldwin Dancy. I will link to it in the show notes. Great book to consider, not necessarily because you're thinking about homeschooling. We can do a whole another episode about that if you're interested. But if you are looking for creating a calm and soothing early years environment, that is a great book to look at, because I think that it will help calm and soothe your nervous system as well as an autistic mom. But again, having your home as an environment that you feel good in and that feels soothing to you is something that will probably be soothing and helpful to your young children. I think that it can be helpful when you're mothering young kids and you're trying to balance so much to think about perhaps a more minimalistic environment, so there's just not as much stuff. It may still be an environment that is full of texture. Again, kind of going back to that Waldorf thing. You know, if you've got the things from nature, like the warm woods, if you've got some lamb skins, if you've got natural fiber blankets and that sort of thing, like having those sorts of things is okay. But overall, having the clutter and doing away with, this is something that I chose to do as a mother with very few exceptions. But we just always chose to have, I chose to have for them toys that were made of more natural materials and that were more minimalistic. Like, for the most part, I avoided like the brazen plastic baby toys and things that were everywhere. Even if we had a mobile, it was a soothing mobile or even a handmade mobile. And I think now probably the most plasticky toy that we have is Legos. Like, we are definitely a Lego family. But all of those annoying, noisy baby and children's toys, like, I told grandparents, do not buy those, or if you buy them, they have to stay at your house, because I just couldn't deal with it. So you can choose and filter what you do and don't want in your environment. And there's an especially big tendency in the Western world when babies and children come along to have a lot of stuff. And you can be more minimalistic. So even if you've got textures and warmth and things around your house that are soothing decorations that you like, you don't have to have all the stuff. Or you can have all the stuff and figure out what you really use and then let go of the stuff that you don't use. So just protecting and structuring the home. And I would even say that, kind of going back to Waldorf or looking at Montessori or something like that, there are many early years philosophies you may research, especially if you're like me and that became one of your special interests. But sometimes even those have a lot of stuff. Like, you'll see photographs of like Waldorf playrooms or Montessori rooms, and there's like all these shelves of stuff. And for me, that even was a lot. And I just didn't want that much for my children. Though a tip that helped me that I got from another mom, and this is as you're getting into little ones less than your infant, but was have things that come out on particular days of the week, and then they get put away. So on Tuesdays, we have a playtime with this toy, and on Wednesdays, we have a playtime with that toy. So just kind of limiting the amount of stuff. And even now, my kids are all, like, my youngest is 7 now, so my kids are all older, and they think a little bit more for themselves about what they want. And I've got a couple, like one of my teenagers especially, he wants to hold on to everything. But I try and encourage them. We think about Marie Kondo, so they know her lingo. It's like, if we're going to think about KonMariing some things, and especially right before and after the holidays, it's like, okay, a lot of stuff may be coming in, or we just got a bunch of stuff, so let's think about KonMariing some things. So you want to help honor your child's autonomy as they get a little bit older and their ability to have things. But if you realize there's stuff that they never play with, it's okay for that stuff to go away. And it's also okay to set limits on what other people give. A good thing is, what experiences can you give to them if you've got grandparents or somebody that wants to give gifts. So just limiting the amount of stuff that comes in. And that's also true for things like kitchen gadgets, cleaners. We can just end up with all kinds of stuff that we don't really use. And so think about what actually gets used. In my kitchen, the Instant Pot gets used almost daily. So that one's definitely a keeper. I've got a little convection oven, a Breville oven. That gets used almost daily. Those things are keepers. But there are many other appliances that don't get used very much. Another fun one that gets used very frequently in my house is, last year for the holidays, I was able to get each of the kids a mini waffle iron. Those get used a lot, at least 2 or 3 times a week. So there may be little things like that that actually get use, but there's a lot of things that do not get use. And so think carefully about those. Or even if there's something that gets used occasionally, like our KitchenAid mixer, I make, challah bread every couple of weeks. You can put that away between uses. So some of this is not stuff for newborn period, but it's just thinking. And this is a place where, having having somebody come in who helps declutter and organize, maybe during pregnancy, or taking some time to go through some checklists. I highly recommend Lisa from Organize 365. All of her resources literally saved my sanity. Again, this week, I've had some medical issues with a loved one. And again, I'm kind of back looking at Lisa's stuff like, okay, what do we need to do to possibly organize this stuff, right? So, but she's got everything from medical to finances to how do you, but starting with the core of how do I organize my house and my life. So if you need external guidance and resources for that, do not be afraid to get that. It can help, and you can definitely baby step into things. All of my stuff has been baby stepping, but looking at the household environment and your house and the clutter there or the lack thereof, all of that's going to play into things. And if you've got a completely Spartan house that doesn't feel right either, again, think about, are there textures that could help? Are there fuzzy blankets? Would lambskins help? Would changing it so that it's not harsh lighting, but instead I've got some lamps in the corner? Those sorts of things. These are the kinds of things that you can think about and write a list in. And if it sounds overwhelming to even do this evaluation, let's definitely talk, because this is the kind of thing that I work with my mama clients on. I love working with the pregnant moms, but I also really, in fact, sometimes it's even more fun to work with the moms who are working on their house because, and family and routines and that kind of thing, because you get quicker results. Like with pregnancy, you got to wait for labor to start and the baby to come before you get the quote unquote results. But with mama clients, you're going to get results right away. And that's a lot of fun. Like we pick an area to focus on. Usually it's meals or sleep or getting the house organized. We pick one of those three areas and then we go. And, within a week or two, there are results. Sometimes even days, there are results. And so that's a lot of fun. So if you feel overwhelmed, definitely reach out to me, birthbabylife.com/beautiful. And we will book a call and talk. But there are lots of resources that can help you with this sort of thing. So again, just clearing the clutter, clearing the space, and creating a space that's full of sensory things that are soothing to you and probably are going to be soothing to your young child is helpful as well. Then another thing to think about just with environment and sensory things is thinking through how you're going to handle overwhelming moments, because those are going to happen as a parent. They really are. Kids, they know how to push our buttons, so to speak, but really what's happening is kids are just being kids, and then we have triggers that come along for various reasons. So when a trigger gets hit, we have to know how to handle it. And you're not going to do perfect all the time. You're going to learn by trial and error. But when you notice that there's a trigger that gets hit, spending some time with that, either working with somebody, journaling, talking with your therapist can be a good thing. Those are things that are really helpful. And then even things that you can do with your child when your child is overwhelmed and starting to think about those, like taking a moment to step away. In fact, sometimes I think that it's far more powerful if you and a child, the child is having a meltdown and you're going to lose it, is instead of putting the child somewhere, saying, I'm going to step away for a minute. And this could depend on the age of your child. Again, my youngest is 7, so I've got older kids still at home. So I can say, I'm going to step in my room for a minute and I'm going to close the door. If I had a little one, I probably wouldn't do that. But I would say, mama's going to walk a few steps away, or mama's just going to step through here, and I would leave the door open, and sometimes they'll follow you, sometimes they're not. But if you stay within, a distance where you guys can see each other, that's usually okay. And like I said in last week's episode, like with a baby, if you need to put the baby somewhere safe, on a blanket on the floor for a young baby and a pack and play for an older baby, and walk away for a minute, those things are okay to do. And especially if you say, mama is overwhelmed, I need a minute, just verbalizing. I don't think that you don't need to be wordy and cerebral like I am with you on the podcast, because small children just do not function on that level. But just a few small words and words that can give comfort and let them know I'll be back in a minute. Because sometimes small children have that anxiety of, oh, mom's going away, or, oh, mom doesn't like me or is rejecting me. And so we want to give that feeling, oh, mama feels overwhelmed, so mama's going to step away for a minute and then mama will be back, letting them know. And then also think about what works for you with your children and what doesn't, to help calm down. So with my kids, usually what helps the most is to have everybody just kind of sit while they simmer down for a minute. Because if you get into, especially once you've got kids who are starting, or you'll teach them, because you're always using lots of words, and you'll teach them to kind of be little attorneys, and they'll verbally spar back with you. And that's just power struggling, and everything gets overwhelming. If you want to learn more about power struggling and that sort of thing, I recommend Nicolene Peck's resources at teachingselfgovernment.com. I will link those below. But you don't want to do that. So you don't want to get into a lot of a verbal sparring match. And so it could be just, okay, we're just going to sit and everybody's going to calm down, and then we will regroup and handle it. Or it may be, Mama's going to step out for a minute, and then we're going to come back and regroup. So thinking about what you'll do in those difficult moments, how you'll diffuse situations, how you'll calm down, how you'll stop power struggles and that sort of thing, what you might do with tantrums. It's harder if you've got older kids who are still tantruming, but with little ones, it's pretty straightforward. I think, you are just there as a presence. And what I've tended to like to do with young children who are tantruming is I will just put them on my lap. If they're really physically moving around a lot, I'll put their back to my back and kind of give them a big bear hug. And you will usually feel them relax back into you, because you're kind of containing some of that energy. You're not scolding or really even talking very much, just saying, I'm going to hold you because I can see that things are difficult. And you're not really focused on them. You can even let your mind go somewhere else, but it's just your presence, and also your, you're not feeding into that. You're just kind of separate from it, but you're a strong and present force, and that will help them calm down. In public areas where I had a child start to have a meltdown, I usually removed them from the area. So, for example, there was a time when I don't even remember which child this was at, but we were at a library story time, and one child started having a difficult time. It was one of the boys, and I just carried him. Our library is small. I just carried him around the corner from where the story time was to where the bathrooms were. And we just kind of stood there in the corner, and I just held him. And, after a minute, he realized that the corner was pretty boring and calmed down. And then we were able to return back. And, if you're shopping or something, you can just set the buggy to the side, and you can step out and go sit in the car, and you may leave or you may be able to go back in. But thinking through these kinds of situations and how you'll handle child meltdowns and how you'll handle your own overwhelm can be really helpful. And then also when we just think about what kinds of play may be overwhelming for us as autistic moms and our nervous system. So lots of loud, raucous play in the house may not be something that works very well for you. It does not work for me. So I will tell my children, you know what, that is outside play, and it needs to go outside, because my kids can go and run outside. If you're in an area where there is not the ability for your kids to go outside, you may want to think about the fact that little children do generally need boisterous, active play. And think about, is there a corner in your house where you can have a little kid gym or something set up to give them the place for that? And then is there a space that is away from that? Or do something like use the noise cancelers or stuff when they're being boisterous. But again, I would encourage you to think about where is a designated place and equipment and toys that are more boisterous, and where are there places in the home that are calm. And do use those noise canceling headphones and that kind of thing if you need to help yourself equalize in that boisterous play. And also think about what you do and do not have to participate in. I love reading aloud to my children. I love cooking with my children. I love looking at their art projects, their Legos, and all of that sort of thing. I have never really been one to get down and play with my children. I will if my girls are playing with dolls. Sometimes I've got Ari that I use for demonstrations sometimes. And so if they're playing with dolls and want Mama to be nearby, I'll change his outfit or something and cuddle him. But I'm not going to do a lot of role playing or that sort of thing. So I've never really been a mom who gets down on the floor and plays with my children. But I like being close to them in their presence while they play, facilitating that by choosing the toys and materials and things that they have to play with. And then when I want to, I interact with them richly by cuddling them, by reading to them, by cooking with them. And even as my children get older, as they move past nursing age, I don't tend to be a very cuddly person, but I'm okay with a kid on either side of me on the couch. And with Phoenix, because I'm still doing his read alouds for his homeschool right now, and I have a chair in my room over here, and I'll have him on my lap. But that's for me, that's just the way that I connect with my kids, is by cooking together and by reading together and taking walks with them rather than playing with them, and getting involved in all of that, which I find overwhelming and difficult to do. So it's okay if you need to think about what feels good to you and what feels intuitive to you and what helps you connect with your kids, and then create environments where you can do that in your home. So it doesn't necessarily have to look the way that you might think that it has to look, because if you find something like playing with your kids to be really overwhelming, well, then you don't have to do that. You can find other ways to connect and bond with them that are quieter. And then, of course, helping children begin to learn about sensory needs is an okay thing. And like I said, with little children, you're not going to be as verbal as I'm being with you right now. You're not going to be cerebral. It's just small things like, oh, mama's body needs a break, or mama needs a break. Or with slightly older kids, you can teach them about being space invaders, because little kids will sometimes get right up on top of people, and it's like, oh, you're being a space invader, you need to step back a little bit, and they usually think that's fun. My oldest daughter, this was during COVID, because she was in college during COVID, and I think she learned this from a friend, that their family would say that they were having astronaut time, because your astronauts are in their big suits, and so even though they may be working beside somebody, they're kind of isolated. And so when her friend's family was having to work in close quarters because of the COVID lockdowns, they would say it's astronaut time. So that could be something fun too, if your child knows what an astronaut is. But those are just little ways to work with young children and to start to help them understand that, oh, mama needs a break. That would be one. Mama needs a break. Mama needs quiet. And I will tell my children this, especially in the van. And I've got one of my kids, this kid is on the spectrum, but he is seriously extroverted, which means he talks a lot and repetitively and will not let things go. And as much as I love him and think that his unique skill set is definitely needed by the world for something, after a time of me, who is definitely a quiet person, even though I love teaching, right? So I'm a little bit of an oxymoron. I will just tell him, it's baby, I need a minute. I need a minute. You've been talking, mama needs a minute. And just let them know. So you can let your children know. Again, with young children, use brevity in your language, and using pictorial language can be really helpful too. Oh, mama's ears are tired. Mama's ears need a rest. Using kind of pictorial language can be helpful for them, or language that they can really relate to. But thinking through how to start setting up those boundaries is okay. It is okay for you as a mom to have boundaries on your body, and especially if you have young children and you've got sensory sensitivities and you get overwhelmed. Again, I didn't see this as much with nursing babies, but once they got older, I definitely would need to let them know, okay, mama needs a break, and just be myself without small people crawling all over me for a little bit. So those are things that can be really helpful just when you're thinking about setting up the environment and starting to guide everybody to be aware of sensory things and what may be overwhelming to you, or how to work with that, or how to balance your children's needs with that, with that sensory awareness and that touched out, or just needing some quiet and some space, because that's natural and normal for all moms. And it's good for you to look at what you need as a mom too. Let's talk a little bit about routines. Routines are so powerful for every family, including families that are neurotypical, families that are neurodivergent. Routines are very powerful when it comes to young children, and they may be very nourishing for you as a mom on the spectrum. So having predictable routines is very, very important for young children. As I talked about in the last episode, it may not be at first with your young baby in the first few weeks, but you will quickly start to see that your baby has some rhythms and patterns in the day, and you can work towards that routine even in that fourth trimester. In that first 12 weeks after your baby is born, you can start to work to routines. And definitely with small children, you want to have routines, because that stability will carry both of you. Again, going back to Waldorf education, they talk about a concept called the Madonna's cloak. And I love that concept. I always joke with moms, you probably heard it before because I'm sure I've mentioned it on another podcast, that it's the same saying that I grew up with in the South, which if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? So if you're out of sorts and overwhelmed and everything, the family seems to reflect that. And I think it's really unfair in some ways, because it's like dad can come home from a bad day of work, and if mom and the kids are good, well, you know what? He soon feels better and everything tends to feel better, unless he's just a real curmudgeon. But if mom steps in and kind of picks up the slack, right? But if mama isn't doing very well, then often everybody has a meltdown, including dad too. And it's like, why is that? And I think it comes back to this: if mama ain't happy, ain't no one happy. And that is the Madonna's cloak concept, which is just that mothers have an aura or an energy around them that carries the family. And so that's not to place a burden on your shoulders, but that's more just to develop an awareness within you of how important it is to take care of and nourish yourself. And routines and rhythms in your home can carry you as well as your child. And especially if you're on the spectrum, routines and rhythms can really, really help you to manage everything that's going on in day-to-day life as a mom. So there's the core routines, like when are we going to eat? When are we going to sleep? And that has nap times included for young children. And if you need extra rest during the day, one of the things that the research says is that autistic people tend to need more rest than neurotypical people. So if you need more rest, definitely rest while your littles are napping. But having mealtime routines and patterns and consistent times, having a nap time, and having a routine for both nap time and bedtime can really be helpful. I was talking to a friend, it was actually a week ago today, that she and I were having a conversation, and she was talking about her little guy who's just started school, and she was talking about how he's having such a difficult time between kindergarten and then the evening routine. It just seems kind of chaotic. And I asked her, well, maybe because he seems to do well with the routine of the school day, and then at home he just kind of melts down. And I said, maybe if you have kind of a consistent routine so that he knows that every day, okay, I'm going to get home from school and I'm going to have this snack, and then we're going to do this thing, and then we're going to do this thing, and then we're going to have dinner, and then we're going to go into the bedtime routine. That might help. And she was reflecting that, yeah, because we've kind of developed a morning routine for getting out of the door. And so I think sometimes as parents, we don't want to like tread upon our children's free time or autonomy. But the reality is that little ones like to have autonomy within solid boundaries. I cannot remember where I heard this analogy from, but they were talking about a playground. And children feel really good when they explore on the playground because they're safe and they'll kind of go all over. But when those boundaries are not as clear, you'll often find anxious and more clingy children. Now today you may find clingy children on the playground too, but it's kind of like they know that there's this solid set of boundaries around the playground. They know there's this boundaried area, and so they're free to explore within that area. And so when we have boundaries and a solid routine, they're free to explore within that. So you may have periods within that routine that are kind of free play and open for your young children. But a lot of the day is probably going to be structured and moving from activities, because when children are left to themselves, they're just kind of miserable. And I love children. I love my little ones. But little people will become tyrants if they rule their entire day, and then they're overstimulated and upset all day, and you're overstimulated and upset all day. And another caveat with this is if you happen to have young children who might be trending towards tyranny, and you try and institute routines, you're probably going to see full-blown tyranny. I worked with a client at one point a few months back where she had one child and she was pregnant with her second, but we were working on routines and stuff, not pregnancy stuff. And, when she started instituting some of these routines, that little fella just went off the deep end. And I just told her, stay the course, because it may be tough for a couple weeks because this kid is used to ruling the roost, but he's not happy, you're not happy. And wait and see what happens. And within a couple of weeks, he started realizing, like, as we baby step into morning routines and then late morning routines and midday routines and afternoon and evening routines, like he became a lot happier. He became a totally different kid, and a kid who ultimately had a lot more freedom because he wasn't being ruled by his whims and emotions anymore. He had a routine and he was able to have more fun and blossom, and this mom was able to relax some and focus on new baby and that kind of thing. So routines are beneficial for your child, because if you think about the stereotypical child who just manages their own day and does everything, they are a tyrant. They are not real happy because they're constantly having meltdowns, and you're not happy either. So you're probably constantly having meltdowns. So let's just put a stop to that. And a simple way to stop that is to start baby stepping into a solid and predictable routine. Some other tools that you can use with young children are you can use things like visual schedules and that sort of thing. And these are things that might start to help you. And I'm going to touch on executive function in a minute too. But using routines and checklists can be helpful. I remember when I had one of my older kids evaluated for special needs, and ultimately I didn't have him diagnosed. Now I sort of regret that choice. At that point, I didn't want him to be labeled. Now I feel differently. I feel like if you or a child are on the autism spectrum, or you think that they are, it may be beneficial to get that diagnosis, even if you don't intend to. The reason I decided not to get the diagnosis was because I decided I didn't want to put him in the special education program in the local elementary school. But I regret that, because I think that even having the diagnosis may have been helpful and could have opened up some in-home services, even if I chose to do at home. But what I'm saying with that is I had the preliminary evaluations done, which involves some home visits. And at that time, I suspected that he was on the spectrum. I wasn't really thinking about myself quite yet, but I had created some visual schedules because I had done research on the internet, seen these things help autistic little people. So I created some visual schedules, and I had one for both kiddos at that time. I think I had 3 at that time, but we're looking at my second. So I had those on the wall so that they knew the order of their day, and we could move the things on the visual schedule as they completed them. And the ladies were so impressed. The home visitors were like, wow, we've never seen any mom that's done this. And again, there we go. There's like my autistic researcher, like, I suspect this is going on with my kids, so what can I do to facilitate the day? But anyways, I don't want to overwhelm you with things to do, but things like visual schedules that help give your child an idea of the flow of the day and also help you handle the flow of the day can be really good. And something that's nice about visual schedules is they can also help incorporate different things. So like we had a little square that was library, because we went to library story time once a week, and we had a little square that was doctor. So I could put that on their visual schedule for the day, and then we could say, oh, we're going to brush teeth, brush hair, and then we're going to go to library. And so those things were there, and that helped them adjust, and it also helped me adjust. And it caused me also to pre-think so that I was able to make adjustments, because we're homebodies. We've always been homebodies. My kids and I still tend to be homebodies. And so adjustments in the schedule, I need to pre-think those. I look every week at my calendar for the upcoming week so that I can think about what might be the same and what might be different. And in our homeschool mornings, my kids and I meet together each morning, and I let them know, this is something that might be a little bit different this morning or today. So like next week in the morning when we sit down, I'll remind them, we have Scouts tonight, but tonight at Scouts, we're going to go to the emergency services garage instead of to the church where Scouts is usually at. And Scouts will probably be a little bit shorter because it'll be done once we finish touring the garage. So it's just simple things like that. And of course, you'll moderate your language to how little the person is. Like I said, oh, today we'll go to the library. I'm not going to give a long lecture about what we're going to do. Oh, we're going to have story time, and we're going to do this and that, and have a snack, and make a craft, and check out books. Oh, we'll have library time. But, using tools like that, like a visual schedule, can be helpful for your child, or some parents will make like a flip book. But those kind of things can be helpful. And then also using pictures and stuff if you need help explaining things. Using that pictorial language can be helpful. So these are all things to help when you're thinking about just ordering the day and making it so that things flow smoothly for you and your little ones. And then also flexibility, like I said, finding ways to help children learn to be flexible, giving them. I do not tend to be like a huge warning in advance kind of parent, because sometimes things fall through. So I'm not going to tell my kids that we have. Sometimes if I want to motivate them, I'll tell them we have a trip or something coming up. But sometimes I won't tell them, but I do try and tell them like within a couple days or the morning of that, okay, something is going to be different. And so let's shift. And then we talk about, okay, when something shifts unexpectedly or when something falls through, these are ways that we handle it. So we can handle it calmly. We can use breathing. We can say, oh, I'm sad that's not happening. And, oh, I hope we can do it again someday. So just think about simple child-appropriate ways. So much of pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, parenting is thinking beforehand. And that's one of the things that can be challenging as a person on the spectrum, because all of that is executive function. And sometimes when you're on the spectrum, your executive function skills struggle. I think that, again, like I said, I think it was in the last episode or maybe the birth episode. But anyways, I said that, I think it was the birth episode, preparing for my baby's births really helped me learn to integrate into my body and get to know myself better. And I think having children really helps strengthen my executive functioning skills, just because when you've got little people, you've kind of got to manage them. My therapist tells me that there are moms who don't manage. They just kind of, muddle their way through. But for me, I wanted to manage and grow and figure out what to do the best for my child, which you want to do as well. And so building up some of those executive functioning skills can be really useful. And I will say that, I have a lot of tools and techniques and things that I can help my kids with, but you've already heard me on this episode mention multiple things like the Waldorf pedagogy that I studied, and Lisa from Organized 365 and her systems. So often it's finding a system and incorporating that into your life. So you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to create all of this. And you can work with somebody like me to get it going and to figure out, okay, how do I manage and juggle all of this? But there are many tools that we can use today that are helpful. So there are systems, like Lisa's got a full system on how do you organize every week using her Sunday basket. That's the foundational and the core, and I will link to that in the show notes if you want to get started with her system. Because every week you go through your Sunday basket. On Sunday, I actually do mine on Fridays, confusingly enough. But that's when it works in my life. But I would recommend the first few weeks do it on Sunday, because she does there's a live video every week with, it's usually not Lisa. She's got somebody else who does it. I think it's Tanya who's doing it right now. But anyways, she's got a gal who's on there every week, and you go through, she walks you through it live via Zoom. You're doing it together, and it's basically doing those things like going through the paperwork that came in this week, going through the appointment reminders that I've got, going through and looking at my meal plan for the upcoming week, going through and looking what's happening on the calendar for the week. Executive function is important, but it is a learnable skill. And so if you feel like it's something that you struggle with, definitely get those supports in place. Meal planning can be difficult, but it is a learnable skill. Figuring out how to prepare healthy meals, figuring out how to handle picky eaters, figuring out how to handle child sleep issues. All of these are learnable skills and things that you can work through. So if you feel like everything is chaos, that's a good time to work with somebody who can help you kind of brain dump everything out, but then can help you introduce systems so that you baby step into things. And I know y'all have heard me say a lot on the past few episodes, I'm a single mom following abuse. Our life was chaos and survival mode after my ex-husband's arrest. I'm not sure how we survived, especially in those early weeks. I know people brought us food. And other than that, it's like just this big dark hole of feeling like I had been shattered and broken open. And I have no idea how we made it through that swirling vortex. I remember lots of driving, lots of court dates, lots of people, and people bringing us food. And I don't know how we survived. And then it took a long time after that to come back to even close to where I was before. And I would say now, I feel like, again, 6.5 plus years, 6.5 plus some months later, that we're doing pretty well. But it's still a struggle. But I mean, I had to rebuild bit by bit by bit by bit. And I rebuilt with the help of other people and other people's systems. And so there's no shame in that. And if you feel like, I don't know how to do this, I get exhausted when I try and do this, like helping somebody figure out what baby steps can you take today is absolutely invaluable. And there is no shame in it, whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse. There's no shame in it. But I will encourage you that getting routines in place and then starting to use some tools and systems that are focused on executive functioning will ultimately help, because you'll be keeping up with the meals, even if the meals are very simple and basic. You'll be keeping up with the laundry, I'll tell you what I did this summer, because I was so tired of handling my 3 youngest sons' laundry issues, is I bought t-shirts in a particular color, forest green for my teen boy, royal blue for my upper elementary boy, and orange for my little guy. And then I bought them enough shirts for every day of the week in that color, the exact same t-shirt. And then I bought khaki shorts for my teen, like a pretty slate gray for my upper elementary boy. And then I think I did navy blue for my little guy. So they basically, and they're boys, so they don't care very much. Even my teen, he doesn't care too much. But they looked nice all summer, and laundry became much easier because they had these outfits and they went in the wash, and I would stain treat them if they seemed to be stained, but it greatly streamlined my laundry. And I've thought a few times, because I'm not sure that my 9-year-old girl would mind too much. I'm like, maybe I should just do the same thing for her. Purple shirt, cute colored pair of shorts. She's good to go, right? But I'm going to do the same. I'm about to order, their color shirts and long sleeve shirts for the cold weather. So, if you need to streamline, it's okay. It's totally okay. Remember, think throughout human history, we just did not have nearly so much stuff or variety. And you don't always need stuff or variety. And young children get overwhelmed by stuff and variety, just like you as an autistic mom probably do. So eliminate a lot of the stuff and the variety. It is totally okay. And then baby step into the systems that help you to manage it. It will really, really help. Other things that you can do, sometimes when you're on the spectrum, you really have trouble with big tasks like clean the bathroom. It's like, what the heck does that mean? I was reading a book. I'm not going to recommend it because I think it was not a great book overall. But I did read a book recently that was meant for autistic adults. And the author said something about, people don't understand that the author was reflecting back on like how terrible childhood was for autistic children because parents just tell you to go clean your room and then, they leave you. And I'm like, I said, that's just bad parenting, because I've read a lot of parenting books that are written by neurotypical individuals. And one of the number one things they will say is if you expect your child to do a big job, you need to break it down. You need to chunk it for them. And so I was like, that was just bad parenting. That wasn't, because you don't understand autistic kids. But I think for you as an autistic person and for your children, you do need to break up big, overwhelming tasks and figure out how to do them step by step, or figure out systems that help you guys to work on it step by step. And then I also am a huge fan of, if you need to use timers or something. One thing, I've had a lot going on lately. There's just been so much, and I was feeling overwhelmed, but really needed to get some things done. And so I would tell myself, I'm just going to work on this for 5 minutes. And I would set a 5-minute timer. And one of the things that I found was I was often able to go for another 5 or maybe even another 5 and get a little further, because once you get going, you get in the flow. But especially if the house is a mess and it's overwhelming and you know that you've got to marshal the troops, or you've got to work on cleaning that up with the baby and the carrier and all that, put on some music, set a timer, and work for that amount of time. Or set alarms to help you remember things. Use the tools that we have. Sometimes I think, especially if I'm going out and about, like I'm usually out and about on Tuesday afternoons and have time out, and I'll get laughed at if that day switches to another day, because a bunch of timers will go off in the afternoon. I have them silenced on Tuesdays because I know I'm usually out and about. But if it's not Tuesday, all these timers will go off, because it's like my life is kind of guided by timers, but they're really very helpful. So again, they're just use systems that help you with executive function, because that will really benefit you. If you've got frustration and things going on, we've touched on some of this, but if there's sensory or emotional overwhelm for you or your children, look at calming techniques, look at things that you can hold. Can you rock? Sometimes just rocking, even with older children, can help soothe everybody. Bouncing on a trampoline or a rebounder, sometimes those things are really helpful for children when they're overwhelmed. And then again, just saying your feelings, like mama feels really angry right now. Again, you don't need to be really verbose and wordy, because little children are not. But you can say, you know what, I feel angry right now. I feel upset right now. Mama's going to take a break, or mama's going to close her eyes and breathe. And you just kind of model that stepping back and that working with things. And then also, if there are like sensory baskets, a box, like a calm down spot box, if you have a sensory area that you can go to, like my kids, usually if I need to calm down, if I'm really upset, I'll close the door. But if I'm just overwhelmed because of the general noise level, I'll sometimes come sit in the chair in here, and I have the door open, and I'll often end up with like a collection of children around me. But they're calmer. Or if they're crazy, like Phoenix was climbing around in here when I came in and did that the other day, and I was like, baby, you need to go out front if you're going to be crazy, because this is mama's quiet spot. And they respect that. So thinking through those kinds of things and spaces that you can have if things feel really calm or really overwhelming can be good. And then again, if you've got a child that you think is on the spectrum, that you think shows neurodivergent traits, you're probably a really good person to look at them and to start modeling for them. Like looking at what are their special interests? How can I support that? What are things like a visual schedule, like helping them with executive functioning skills? My kid who's diagnosed on the spectrum is a teen now, and I spend a lot of time working with him on executive functioning skills and systems, because otherwise it's just kind of all over the place and a mess. In a good way, but a mess, a creative genius type of mess. And so it's just, what are ways that we can create structures in our life that will help you be successful as you move towards adulthood? And with little ones, we're not necessarily at that place yet, but what are things that can help them feel successful? And then, direct communication, openness, empathy, those are all things that you want to be modeling and looking at. And then, of course, you really want to make sure that throughout your day, you are looking at your own self-care and your care. Make sure that those routines build in time for you. Make sure that you build in time for your special interests, even as a mom. I know that one of the things that's most nourishing to me, I think I mentioned this on another episode recently, is just having a little bit of time in the evening for my special interest. And usually for me, that's reading, research, or deep nonfiction books about topics that are interesting to me, or watching lectures on things that are interesting to me that don't really have to do with, work or anything. I mean, I love good pregnancy and birth research too, but there's other topics I want to research. And sometimes I spend much of the day working with clients or researching for clients or looking at what is the cutting edge research on pregnancy, birth, mothering stuff. And so being able to sit down and do something that really interests me, like looking at nutrition for myself, or, taking a course on the works of Jane Austen or something like that. Like just being able to indulge my special interests is something good. One of the things that I want, this is so funny, I will admit this to y'all, if you've made it this far into the episode, I really want the Rivendell Lego set, which is a huge, expensive Lego set, right? And I have not splurged on it yet. But I can just imagine I'm going to have so many days of joy when I am building that Lego set. And it's so silly, but it's something that I know. I've loved Legos since I was a little kid. My dad gets annoyed coming over the house and stepping on Legos. And he's like, you should really get rid of some of these Legos. And I just can't do it because they were a joy for me in my childhood. I loved Legos. I love that my kids love Legos. They're out there playing with Legos right now. I can hear them. So, looking forward to getting that Rivendell Lego set is one of the things that gives me joy now, and it's a special interest I will definitely indulge once I get that. But again, so taking time for yourself and for your special interests, and it can be challenging, especially if you've got little babies, but I've written so many articles, read so many books while nursing babies, or written articles even rocking on the birth ball with the baby on my back while I'm typing. I have done that. Many of the articles on natural birth and baby care were written like that. Y'all know, if you've listened to some of the older podcast episodes, many of them have baby noises on them because I recorded while I was bouncing on a birth ball with a baby, recording a podcast. I love being in the kitchen. I like cooking. That's a skill that I have developed over years. And, learning to incorporate my kids in the kitchen and seeing seeing them begin to take joy in that. So what are special interests that you have? How can you find time to fit those special interests in? Those sorts of things will be nourishing to you as well. And also getting support. If you're entitled to support from your jurisdiction or municipality because you have a diagnosed disability, definitely take advantage of that, especially if it can be in the form of somebody coming in and helping with the house cleaning and that sort of thing. If you can afford that kind of support, I would definitely say to go for it. Also, if you need somebody to talk with you, if you need a therapist who specializes with adults on the spectrum, that can be really helpful. I find my therapist to be helpful in helping me think through things, and it's especially important as a single mom when sometimes you feel like you don't have somebody else to make decisions with you. Having somebody who can help you think through and talk through those things and who also understands your neurodivergence can be a really good thing and a really nourishing thing for you. So, environment, systems, routines, supports from your partner, from your greater community, from, mental health professionals, even from somebody like me who works with moms and coaches moms and can help you kind of work through those nitty-gritty practical things, as well as just listening and being a sounding board for you. All of those things will help you and if you've got neurodivergent kids, you've got a great advantage in helping them, creating and structuring a life that can encourage them to grow and be supported. And again, those executive functioning skills can help you juggle their paperwork and their appointments and all those kinds of things. Those are all learnable skills. So even if you need to baby step into those things, know that they are. And also know another thing before we end this episode is know that if you are a homebody like me, if you like things to be closer to home, that's okay. You're not depriving your kids of anything. My kids do scouts and we go to church and then we homeschool, and that's okay. That's what I can manage and what I can handle, and that's what we thrive in, and we have lots of fun at home and do lots of things at home. And so that's okay. So remember to take care of you, create an environment that nurtures your children within what you can do, and know that you are a wonderful mom for them. You are the perfect mom for them, a good enough mother, not perfect, but the perfect mom for them. And that is really what they need. So with that, I hope that you have a blessed week, and I will talk with you next week.